What's up, guys? Coach Justin with Nova Ryu BJJ, and I'm super excited about today's episode. Here today with the incredible Hillary and Brian Vanornum, the married couple, owner and head instructors at Unicorn Jiu Jitsu here in beautiful Portland, Oregon. So thank you guys for coming on the channel. I appreciate it. Looking forward to what you guys have to show us. Do you each want to give a little brief introduction about yourself and kind of what brought you to Jiu-Jitsu, your Jiu-Jitsu journey, and maybe some of your competition accolades, that type of thing?
Sure. I'm Hillary. I started training in 2005 outside of Washington, D.C. in Virginia. My brother and I were training, and every day was something like a different discipline. One day was Jiu-Jitsu, one day was kickboxing, there was Krav Maga, Vale Tudo, and then Judo. And then our Judo coach there, we really liked him. They changed the program a lot, and we went and trained full-time Judo for 2 years. And then Brian and I were already married. I tried to get Brian to train, and he didn't really like it at the time. Was it a Judo class that you came to first?
Oh.
Didn't really like the Judo at the time. But we moved back to Portland, and my brother stayed behind in DC. And I was nervous to go train without my training partner, who's 6'5" and a large foster-sized man. But we finally got back to training in 2009, and I've been training since then. But I focused on MMA at first, and I liked kickboxing and stuff better. But then I got a blue belt. I did my first tournament, which was like the Abu Dhabi World Pro in San Diego, and I was like, there's other women my size in my belt. This is incredible. And that's what got started with the Jiu-Jitsu, like being the focus for me.
Got it.
So.
And then, and you had kind of a story competition career. What are some of the highlights of it, or what have been the fun parts for you looking back? And
I got to compete like at Worlds and Pan Ams a lot in the adult division. I got to go against Chris Cyborg at purple belt, which was really cool. I mean, I lost, but I think I gave her toughest match that she had in Jiu-Jitsu.
Nice.
And the whole like pyramid was watching that match, and then afterwards, people were like, "Oh, you did so good," and I was like. So that was pretty cool. I won Adult Worlds at brown belt. And then I did get to do Worlds 3 years at black belt. I got some consolation bronze medals for losing my first match, but my first year at black belt, I actually tore my ACL at Worlds in my first match, and then I had another match against Dominica after that, which did not go well. And I've done okay at Masters. I've done better at Masters, but I am 46, so.
Young.
Yes, but I'm still contemplating maybe going back to adult one more time.
Yeah?
Yeah. And then.
As Hillary mentioned, she had probably been training 6-7 years or so, and during that whole time was like, why don't you just come check out a class? I was always reluctant, and it was kind of one of those things where, you push someone and they want to push back even harder.
Sure.
And for whatever reason, she finally convinced me. I went to a class, and then I was like, why didn't I listen to you sooner, right? So I've been training since 2013. Got my black belt 3 years ago. Competition-wise, blue belt, I won Masters Worlds, and then took second in the open weight. Purple belt, took first in the division. And then unfortunately, brown belt, I was preparing for Pan Ams that year, and I tore my LCL. So I was out for several months because of that. Then COVID hit. So the brown belt career didn't really go very well.
You didn't win it at brown belt.
I didn't win it at brown belt, unfortunately. But still, I'm trying to be active in the competition scene. It's hard as a gym owner.
Sure.
And with injuries.
And with injuries.
We've both had our share of knee injuries and shoulder injury, and
And all sorts of stuff, surgeries and all that.
Yeah.
And so that's a question I wanted to ask both of you. As instructors and competitors and people who just train Jiu-Jitsu, how important do you view competition to the training process? In other words, do you think people have to compete, or is it like a requirement in order to advance through the rankings, or could you go your entire Jiu-Jitsu career just training on the mat and never stepping foot on the competition space?
Do you want to take that first, or you want me to?
My personal opinion is it's not a requirement, but I feel like it certainly helps, right? We get used to our training partners. We know what they're going to do. We know what they're working on. You can plan for, at least, give it a good guess as to what they're going to do, right? You go out to a tournament, you're going against people you have absolutely no idea. I mean, yeah, maybe you've watched some tape on them, but who knows, right? I oftentimes, especially, kind of on the local level, viewed those local tournaments as just an additional training day, right? Not required, but I definitely see the benefit to doing it. We encourage it to do it at least once at every belt level, but we're not going to be like, oh, you don't compete, we're not going to, you're not going to get promoted or whatever. Some people just like to come into the gym and just, do their thing here. It's a whole different thing to get on to the competition mat. So that's kind of my perspective on it.
I think I share that perspective. For me, it's being a woman, especially coming up a while ago, I didn't have female training partners. So I only got to roll with women my size and belt in the tournament setting. So I think if you don't have training partners that are the same size and belt level, sometimes it's a good way to just kind of measure where you are.
Sure.
But we don't have the requirement either, or at all. If they want to compete, great, and we support anybody who competes. Whether we think they're going to win or whether we hope they win a match, we try to get everybody ready, no matter who it is. But also about competing, for me, it's how I've met a lot of my best friends.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I've become really good. 3 of my best friends are former competitors. And we don't ever want to compete against each other again, so that's also difficult. One of them is Marisha Malyasiak, she's BJJ Grumpy Girl. We had a match at Master Worlds in 2020, and I was like, you can just win. And she said, no, can I have a warm-up match? I was like, sure, that's a great idea. So if you ever find that video of us rolling, it was a fake match, and we almost got double DQ'd because we didn't know that was illegal at the time.
Got it.
And she went on and won double gold at the Master Worlds that year.
Right on. No, that's awesome. I think I would also share that opinion. I don't think ultimately it should be required that you have to do it in order to advance, because you can certainly get better, but it's relative to your training partners, not necessarily to Jiu-Jitsu as a whole. Well, and then further from that, as far as competition goes, how do you guys go about preparing your team for their development? Because it's part of stepping on the mat to do the actual competition, but it's also that whole lead up to it, right? That seems to be a benefit of sorts, is that you're really focusing your training. What steps do you take with your competitors in your gym?
I feel like we're still working on that. I would like people to be more diligent, or what's the word I'm looking for? This is a pause in the.
Fair. Take your time.
I have no idea what you're
not
trying to say.
diligent, but
Driven, focused.
Specific with their training, focused.
Intentional?
Thank you. Yes, intentional.
I've got a thesaurus to the side. For those watching at home, I'm cheating.
I would like people to be more intentional with their training, in getting ready, and I think you have to have a specific goal when you're competing. Do you want to be a world champion, or are you hoping to win a match? Are you just getting this to get out there and test yourself? What is your reason for competing? And I think that's something to really consider, and what we consider, when one of our students who I think could be an adult world champion at purple belt, when she's getting ready to compete, we are very specific. The rounds are her length. I'm making sure she's getting the correct training partners. I'm making sure she's not going with a white belt big guy that she's not going to encounter at a purple belt match. So
right.
I really try to focus on making sure people have the appropriate matchups in training, and that we give them the correct length rounds. We try to bring in a lot of different instructors, including world champions like Dominica and we had her run a comp class 2 weeks ago, and it was cool to see how she used to prepare, at Marcelo's, and what Marcelo Garcia would have her do. It's we take some of that. We had Nikki Sullivan here. We've had her a couple of times, and she showed what Andre Galvao does in competition classes at Atos. So it's cool to kind of get these other people to come in and show us how they do that, and we've kind of taken some of that.
Well, and then we've got a competition-focused class on Saturday mornings.
Sure.
Where it's limited to no instruction whatsoever. It's about conditioning. It's about, like Hillary was saying, focusing on your A game, really sharpening those tools for you. Or if there's specific positions that, if there's a trend throughout your last couple matches, like, oh, this is always happening to you, right? We focus on that and we're like, okay, what's really happening here? What am I doing? What are they doing to cause these things to happen? But it goes back to that intention, right?
Sure.
It's not just like, okay, it's open mat, go do some rounds.
Just do some rounds.
Right.
And I think that helps a lot. And so we have that Saturday class, but then we have a Monday, Wednesday class that we call it intermediate, but it really ends up becoming comp class light.
Right.
Well, we'll spend maybe 20 minutes on a technique and get some drilling time in and stuff, but then it goes back to that, okay, we're preparing for this thing. Are there any questions?
Any problems you're having,
Right.
positions you're struggling with.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of the approach that we're at right now. But like Hillary said, I think it's a fluid thing, right? And we're always trying to figure out what's best for our competitors and trying to supply them what they need to succeed.
Right. No, that totally makes sense. Well, I think, okay, so that speaks perfectly to a question I wanted to ask both of you, and that's, in teaching jiu-jitsu, it seems to me there's there's an inherent, very big challenge in that, in part, it's constantly evolving, right? There's always techniques being evolving. It's not just like a lot of traditional martial arts where there are these 75 katas, you just learn those and that's jiu-jitsu. It's not that. So there's always stuff that's being developed. It's always changing. The competition meta is always changing too. There's new games, not just techniques, but like new games or approaches being developed. And then in any given class that you have, whether it's 8 people or 58 people on the mat, you have usually a wide variety and disparity. Some people are very, they're good athletes, and other people have never played a sport in their entire life, and they're 50 and they're stepping on the mat for the first time. And so how do you keep things grounded? You're teaching good foundationals, but also engaging to those people who are athletes and addressing all those concerns. How do you work to balance that? I'm asking as a newer school for advice.
I think we're still trying to figure that out. I mean, in our fundamentals class, sometimes we'll do some more advanced things, but we try to keep it pretty fundamentals. And we've had brown belts come in from other schools that have, joined us that are like, I've never seen that thing. And I mean, I was like that too, because I had a few different coaches coming up where I didn't learn how to knee slice until I was a purple belt. It's just, it wasn't in my old coach's toolbox, or at the time, that's not what they showed. So, but we try to keep the fundamentals pretty fundamental, but still see holes in people's games. And then if the more advanced people want to learn fancier things, that's what the more intermediate classes are. But that's when we try to bring in other coaches.
Sure.
I thought that like by now I would know all the things in jiu-jitsu, and there's I don't do knee bars, like I don't do the leg attacks. So we try to bring in people that fill in our holes, because we don't know everything, and I don't think we're ever going to know everything. So bringing in other people is really, and by competing, I have met, and Brian has met other people, and then we become friends, and then we're like, hey, do you want to come teach at our school? And they do. So.
And I think that's it kind of goes to the, everything's evolving, everything's changing. There's this old school philosophy or thought of, our jiu-jitsu is our jiu-jitsu, right? We're not going to share it with you, and we don't want to know anybody else's, right? And we're evolving in that, whereas no, we want you to come. We want to see what it is that you're doing, because potentially it is something that we can either add to our game, or we can at least add it to the curriculum, just because we don't do it necessarily, right? And I think the fundamentals classes are huge, right? As Hillary's saying, we've had upper belts come in and be like, I've never seen that simple armbar before. And it's like, but why not? Everything builds upon that. You have to know the basic, understanding of the position and the functionality and the positions and the I understand wanting to know how to barimbolo and grab ankles and stuff. We can get there. We can do that, right? But let's understand the basic stuff first. One of the things I think we kind of have fun with in our intermediate classes is we'll say, okay, what did you see on Instagram this week? Is that legit? Is that real? Is it actually going to work?
Let's try.
Because we'll have the kind of initial thought of, oh, that's rubbish, that's not going to work, you know. And quite honestly, there was a position that I thought that somebody wanted to do it in class, and I was like, okay, fine, let's play with it. I've added it to my game now.
Oh yeah.
Right. It is legit. It is legit. It works, and it's like, oh my god, like. But that's the evolution process of it all, and it's not fancy necessarily. It's just a different way of looking at things, right? But I think we have fun like that as well. You know, we're not going to discredit every Instagram person out there. Yes, there's some stuff that you're like, no, don't even.
Right.
But then there's some stuff that you're like, oh wow, that actually blends in very well with what I do already. So.
Totally. Well, I think that is definitely one of the elements of jiu-jitsu that I think is beautiful. Is you can be creative with it. Like you can put your own stamp on it. You can make up moves, and like that is a really cool thing. And it sounds like we're all on the same page. But I'll pose the question anyway. As far as I guess one of the dangers I see with this limitless aspect of jiu-jitsu is that it could just evolve right off the table and become something that's not even recognizable as a self-defense art. You know, it's so hyper-focused that only. Like, sure, it'll work if you're an elite athlete and have crazy levels of athleticism, but it's not available to everybody. Yeah. So, should there be kind of like a codified, this is jiu-jitsu at its base level? Like, you can't really be a black belt without XYZ, or should it just sort of be everybody's individual take on it?
I don't think it should be, because there's certain things that I can't do.
Sure.
Like a barrel roll, or inverting is scary for me in my back and my neck.
Yeah.
So I try. Yeah. I don't think there should be, or else I might not be a black belt.
No, agreed. I'm in the same boat.
And I think one of the things we really try to do is have our students develop their own games and not be copies of us.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And actually, one of our purple belt, really good competitor, she's kind of developed her spider guard game from Dominica and from Mauricia, who have very different spider guard games, but she's spent so much time with both of them that she's kind of blended both, and it's really cool to see. And like, we're not spider guard people at all. And it's cool, like even Brian, when he was coming up, his game is totally different than mine. I mean, we have very different body types too, but we're both tall.
Sure.
But yeah, I think it's been cool to see different people develop their own games. Or like, we have a wrestler who wrestled in college, but is a guard puller.
Oh, no way.
Yeah,
really?
He'll pull guard, like at the Portland Open, he was like, well, I can't get the takedown right now, I'm just gonna pull guard, and he got a sweep, and so it's really cool to have people like that and do something different.
Yeah, we always say that, make your, like Hillary was saying, make your jiu-jitsu your jiu-jitsu, make it your own, right? I'm gonna show you a method of doing the thing, but if you're like, well, I wanna put my hand here instead of here, and your outcome is the same, I'm not gonna, no, you're doing it wrong, you have to do it this way, right? And so that goes back to that I don't believe as well that there should be a specific, okay, here's your 99 moves, you know, and we know people like that. They have a list, and then when they do their gradings or whatever, they're testing, and it's like, you have to know these. That's great, right? But not everybody's gonna be able to do those things necessarily, right? So we have to encourage the developing of the skills for you, you know, what works best for you. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think those are great answers. Well, and then off of that, I guess I'll ask this question broadly, but there's some framing I'll do for it. So, I want to ask what a black belt means to you, and to frame this out a little bit better, you know, I think there's kind of a level of expectation that anybody has where if you're a black belt, okay, you should be able to roll and do well against other black belts. Like, that's a reasonable expectation, generally speaking. But then there's all these added components to, like, if somebody gets injured and they're out for a year and a half and they come back and they're not doing well against blue belts, we don't say, okay, you have to give that black belt back. You're done. Like, you know, there's a allowance for that type of thing. Or as people age, right? Father time is undefeated, and I don't expect at 75 I'm going to be quite as physically active as I am in my 40s, and you know, not now compared to what I was in my 20s. So there has to be something beyond just your ability to roll and do well competitively with other black belts. So what are the nuances there? What do you see a black belt being representative of?
I kind of think of it like school. Like, have you, like, a black belt is like maybe you graduated from like an undergraduate degree? Maybe, I don't know, that's just kind of I like to make analogies.
Sure.
And if you know all the things and you can understand it, you can teach it. Or if you're competing, we just had a woman, Masters 6, she won Blue Belt Masters Worlds 2 years in a row, her division in the open class. It's probably time for her to get her purple belt. She's obviously doing extremely well for her age, and she's got bad knees and she's got bad shoulders, and she's was former Air Force, so she's got a lot of like miles on her body, and so her potential is different than the 20-year-old purple belt or blue belt.
Sure.
So I think you have to, and that's something that one of my old coaches would talk about is like, what is the person's potential? And the 60-year-old is going to be different than the 20-year-old.
Sure.
So if you look at their overall potential, what is a black belt for that person? It's them understanding a large variety of techniques and why, and that's my. Do we have the same philosophy on this?
Yeah, it's fairly similar. There's a wonderful saying, it's not about who's best, it's about who's left.
Yeah, I love it.
There are levels to it, when the colored belts, there's people are kind of in line with each other, right? You get the black belt, and you're going to have a black belt that's here, and then you're going to have a black belt that's up here, right? And I've experienced that on both sides. We were up at some friends up in Bellingham several months ago, and the black belts that they had brought in for this weekend-long seminar, I was just like, wow, I do not deserve to have this thing around my waist. But there's all the other things that go back. Are they training on, are they running a school?
Yeah.
Are they able to get their own training in? How often are they training? What's their recovery look like? There's everything that goes into it. So I don't know that there's like one solid definition of what is a black belt, right? Because there is that misconception, oh, you're a black belt, that means you're going to come kick my butt.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, not necessarily, right? I think we were talking prior to this, and you're like, well, if that 20-year-old D1 wrestler comes in, you know what? I may be able to hang with them on the mat, on the ground, maybe. I may be able to keep myself safe,
Sure.
right? But that doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to be able to submit them,
Right.
It doesn't, and again, there's levels to it.
Yep.
Right.
No, totally agree with you. Yeah. I am black belt and Gordon Ryan is black belt. I'm pretty sure I have a keen understanding of how a match between myself and him would go.
Exactly.
We had Adam Borzinski come in this summer, and it was right after he won Worlds. It was 2 weeks after he won Worlds, and it was really cool to watch him roll and then teach, and he was doing exactly what he did in his matches. And one of our black belts came off the mats and said, well, isn't that freaking depressing? And I was like, what, that the world champion just kicked your ass? Like, that's, I was needing knee surgery, so I didn't get to roll with him, but I was also kind of okay with that, because he probably would have demolished me, and I would have been like, just take it.
Right.
But he is like the top of the food chain right now, and he was incredible.
One of our brown belts came off the mats after rolling with Adam, and he was like, man, his game is just like yours. It's just a lot better. And I'm like, was that a compliment? but it goes back to that there's levels to this, right? Yeah, we do very similar things. Our body types are very similar. Our games are but he's just got it up here where I'm still trying to.
I think your beard game is on.
Yeah.
Commensurate with his. That's
I'll give him that too.
And he was also an awesome human. Like, we were really impressed by him as a human, so.
I've heard nothing but good things. I'm sorry I missed that seminar.
Well, I think we'll try to have him back.
Okay. Cool.
Very good.
Oh, well, that's awesome. And I think that's a great answer, and I would agree with that too. Well, then I wanted to go back to talk a little bit.
Actually,
go
can I
ahead.
add one
Please.
thing? I think for us, like with Jiva, if Jiva says you're a black belt, I trust Jiva. I trust anything that man says about Jiu-Jitsu.
Sure.
He also makes me feel like just him in Wellington. I'm like, I can't. Yeah. So I think like when somebody super high level can say, "Oh yes, you're a black belt," like. I trust.
That means something. Yeah, that endorsement for sure. Well, that's I mean, I would share that same thought. Training with Foster, where he's a coach to all of us, and I would trust his opinion on that. It's a hard thing to do sometimes, to put that faith in somebody else. But if they have that belief in you, then you should accept that.
Yep.
So. Well, okay, and you've had opportunities throughout the years to train with a number of legends and names in the sport. And do you want to talk a little bit about people who have been great mentors or teachers, coaches, influenced your game?
Well, I think mentors would be Foster. Has been a mentor since I got my black belt. He kind of took me under his wing and helped me when I was getting ready to compete a lot, which is pretty much how we made the transition to be under Foster and Jiva. But earlier on, I think, as far as bigger names, Chris Howder was a really influential person in both of our jiu-jitsu journeys. The first memory I think they have of Brian, Melissa, his wife, had broken her leg. It was the day after Worlds. We were training in the garage. I was a purple belt. Brian was a white belt. And somebody broke Melissa's leg pretty badly above her ankle. And Chris goes, "White belt." Carried my wife in the house. And Brian's like, "Oh, okay." And he picked her up. And Melissa's like, "Brian's my savior." But we've been really fortunate to spend a lot of time with them over the years in the garage. We've taught at Globetrotters camps in Europe with them. Just learning, I can recite some of Chris's speeches about the seductive nature of the guard. And, my background is judo, so I want to be on top. I don't pull guard. I'm working on that. But be on top, stay on top, be the person on top, that mentality, and just some of his self-defense and also just old school mentality of jiu-jitsu has really been influential to us. And then an unknown person who has been really, I say unknown, she's not famous, is one of my best friends, Rhonda Andrews. She's down in Las Vegas. She owns a Gracie Humaita down there. And we met at Purple Belt. She was my first match ever at Purple Belt. And she was one of the top Purple Belts at the time. She was always competing with Mackenzie Dern. And we haven't competed against each other since that match. But we just became very good friends, and her fundamentals are phenomenal. And she is really good at turtle, and I am terrible at turtle. It doesn't feel good on my body to be in that position. But she has taught me a ton over the years, especially before we opened Unicorn. We would go down there and train for a week with her at her school, and she's a 3rd degree black belt now. She doesn't compete anymore. She needs new knees. As we all do.
Right.
She's our age, but she's been really influential in both of our jiu-jitsus. And then other competitors for me is Dominica and Marisha have been Dom was one of my early matches at black belt, and we just kind of became friends. And then she's spent a lot of time here at Unicorn teaching, and I've learned so much from her. And then Marisha also has been here several times, and I'll go down to Virginia. I was at a DC and train with her at Admar Barbosa, who I've known him since I was a blue belt, and he is a phenomenal coach, and he's really detailed. So those are my big influences.
I would probably echo all of that. And maybe it's cheesy to say, I don't know, but anybody I've ever shared the mats with has influenced me probably in one way or another, whether I realize it at the time or not. Hillary mentioned the BJJ Globetrotters. We did 2 trips based around their camps. I don't know if you're familiar with it. They host 3-4 day, 5 day long jiu-jitsu camps in some places that maybe not the easiest places to get to, or they're not your typical tourist destinations. Primarily in Europe, because the gentleman that started that is from Europe. But you get to meet people from all over, right? Different games, different philosophies, and I feel like those trips specifically probably really opened my eyes to the jiu-jitsu world, and it can be more than what's happening on the mats. It can be how we interact with each other outside of that.
Well, I'd say the year that Brian won Master Worlds at Purple Belt
that's where I was going. Yeah.
Was the year we did 2 different camps, one in Belgium and then one in Iceland. And Brian was on the mats we did almost every class that we could.
3 or 4 hard training sessions a day, every day.
Wow.
Unfortunately, I look back at it and I'm like, we didn't really get a chance to enjoy those places.
Jiu-jitsu the whole
it was just everybody else was like, oh, we went to the
Hot Springs.
the hot springs, or we went to the phallic museum in Iceland, and I'm like,
We didn't do anything. Iceland.
damn it, I've been training this whole time, but at the same time, I had a goal,
Yeah.
right? I was coming back, getting ready. It was like a week after we got back, or 2 weeks after we got back, that Masters Worlds was happening, and there were some expectations, both from myself and I think some other people, because I have been doing really well in the competition circuit, and it was just like, I gotta train. If I'm not training, I'm resting. So now I kick myself and like, I want to go back and actually see those places, but I think anybody that I've ever shared the mats with, anybody I've slapped bump with, has influenced me or shown me something in some way. And I think that's really important to recognize. And it's not just one. I think everybody has an impact on us. So.
No, I love that. Yeah, I love both answers. That's profound. That is awesome.
So the big point is travel.
Yeah.
Train with other people.
Iceland's still there. You can still go.
Well, yeah.
Okay, no, that's very cool. Well, then, so you mentioned people you've competed against, and kind of they've obviously played an important role in your growth as a jiu-jitsu player. I guess it would be maddening to have somebody, we talk about gym nemesis all the time, right? Somebody who just beats the brakes off you every time you roll with them, but you dread it, but you still keep coming back for more. They make you better. Is it just, does it take on an elevated significance though when it's in the competitive arena, on the competitive mat? Does it drive you to push harder knowing that person's at that tournament?
Well, it's not necessarily a person. Well, there has been some people that were. Marisha, at first, we went against each other at purple belt, and I didn't know who she was, and she came out and she threw me and armbarred me, and I was like, nobody throws me. And she was with Admar, and I had trained with Admar, and I was like, he's like, what? He knows me. This isn't fair. So I used her as fuel for a while. But where I was going to go is I've actually used positions. There was like a year and a half or 2 years where I kept getting plotted.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, I'm going to learn how to plotta. I'm going to get better at this. And it was mainly Dominica and then Claudia Duval. And we actually brought Claudia. It was right after we opened. She was here for a fight to win. And I said, hey, do you want to come by the gym? We're friends. And I was like, can you show me how you're plotting me? And she was like, absolutely. And she was like, I'm still going to try to do it to you. And I was like, wonderful. I'm going to try not to let you. But I learned some really good plotta details from Claudia after her doing it to me multiple times in tournaments.
Great.
So have you used?
You were getting caught in plottas for a long time. I was getting caught in deep half for a very long time, right? And so I was doing middle heavy for a while. Put on a couple pounds since then. But it was either tall, lanky guys, right, or short, stocky. And it seemed like I was always getting the shorter, stocky guys on my side of the bracket, and they were all pulling deep half pretty quickly. And I was struggling with it. And it was actually up at a Jiva seminar. Well, we just kind of pulled him to the side, and he's like, "Oh, I saw you, competing. I see you're getting caught." And he recognized it without me even saying, "Hey, can you show me?" Right? And I thought that was really cool.
We don't get caught in it anymore.
We don't, and I know how to deal with it. But it's interesting. I think because the women's divisions were smaller, and it was a lot of the similar people, I haven't had, unless it was like a local, thing where you're always going against the same people. All like the IBJJF tournaments, I haven't had somebody that I've gone against multiple times. It's always been different people. So, forgot where I was going with that comment, but
a nemesis
and
in
then,
training or competition.
Or competition nemesis.
You were somebody else's competition nemesis.
I hope so. I think that would be great. I've had some folks that have been in the bracket, but they've always been on the other side. Or if it's like Masters Worlds, they're in a completely different, because there can be 3-4 different brackets, and we've just never been able to link back up again in that way. Like the year I won Masters Worlds at Blue Belt, the gentleman that I beat in the semifinals and then the gentleman I beat in the finals, they're still competing, right? And we've ended up being at the same tournaments, we've just never had that
Yeah.
opportunity to
go
go against each other again. Which I mean, honestly, I'd be thrilled with.
Sure.
Right? Because you're like, okay, I want to see
see
where
now.
you've grown.
Where do we stand?
Right? Yeah, and I want to see,
I do have a competition nemesis. A woman named Jen Case. She has beaten me 4 or 5 times. And every time we're friends. She is a nutritionist and dietitian, and she's actually done my diet before. She works for Renaissance Periodization, and every time she's like, "All right, Hillary, let's go." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm gonna get you this time." Like and she's always like, "Bring it." And there's just some people that have your number, where the styles just match up, and Jen Case, I'm getting you. One of these days.
You've been put on notice. You've been put on
Oh,
notice.
she knows, and like, we always joke about it, but
Yeah.
And she's like, I think she's by far the #1 Masters 2. She stayed in Masters 2 right now because she wins everything. But yeah, she's one that just, no matter, and it's been different every single time. Like I'll throw her and then she'll counter me, and I'm like, yeah.
Oh, that's so frustrating. But it's good. It
But
is
because
good.
the women's divisions are smaller, but they're getting bigger.
they are, yeah.
Especially at black belt, there's getting to be more and more women. I still haven't done a Masters Worlds at Masters 4, but at the Masters, because of my knee injuries and surgeries, but at the Masters International at Worlds this year, I actually had an opponent in my division, but she's one of my really good friends. And that was real, like, I was like, should we compete? Should I drop down? And Megan was like, no, like, there's only so many of us super heavy black belt females. Like, we're going to be friends afterwards. And it was like, she did amazing. She was the best she's competed. So it was cool to get to go against her and then give her a big hug and be like, great job.
Well, let's talk about women's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, because I know you're an inspiration on that front, and you're one of the few in the Pacific Northwest, or maybe even nationally, women-owned Jiu-Jitsu gyms. And I know you're a big advocate of women in Jiu-Jitsu and martial arts in general. You think you run a women's-only training camp?
Yeah, we have a camp every summer, and it's with 3 of my best friends who I've competed against that are the coaches. We keep the same coaches every year, but part of the goal with that camp is to get women together and to realize we're not each other's like competition. Like we can still be friends and compete and build the community bigger. We've ended up having more women come from. We've had 2 female black belts come from Canada. That fly down from Canada. People fly in from Florida, Virginia, Massachusetts, and I was hoping to build the local community better, and I would love to have more women come from Portland and Seattle area. But it is like, it's cool to have women come from all over the country in Canada. So it's
Sure.
But yes, there's very few of us female like black belt gym owner head coaches. There's a lot of women that say, "Oh yeah, I own a gym. My husband's the black belt. I'm a blue belt or I'm a purple belt," and I feel like there's a big difference between those people. But that's another subject.
That's another subject.
Another time. But it is difficult, and like I was worried that men weren't going to want to come in and have me be their head coach. But the guys that we have here are like so supportive, and they listen to me and they respect me, and it's cool. And I think something a mentor more off the mats and how she conducts herself is Emily Kwok. She is incredibly smart, and one of her big things is having women lead from the front, and not like we don't have women's only classes here.
Okay.
Having women lead the class is enough. Like it shouldn't have to be women only for women to feel comfortable. And if a woman's in charge, if a woman's in front of the class leading, it shouldn't matter. Like it shouldn't have to have a separated class. And that also opens the gym and the classes up for non-binary, trans people, like everybody, so everybody feels comfortable training. That's one thing we really try to foster here. Everything is gender specific here, like the bathrooms, changing stalls, everything. We don't have, except for camp. Camp is the only time that we do a women's only thing. We're trying to just normalize women being in front. That's I think that's a term Emily has coined, is having women at the front, just normalizing that.
No, that's awesome. Well, and then this is something I've run into in other conversations that I've had on the channel, but if you were to explain to somebody who is, or I guess maybe to rephrase, I think there's kind of a self-obvious benefit if you ask like a smaller, weaker woman, say, to train with a larger, heavier male, to say, well, if you train against this person, you learn to contend with that strength and that sort of thing. And that could be, like a selling point. But I think there's benefit, like Brian mentioned earlier, anybody you step on the mat and train with, you're going to get something out of that role. You can get something out of that role. So to frame the benefits for those people who are hesitant, because I'll have male students who are like, I don't know if I could roll with a woman. You do run into that or have that conversation. And if you were to kind of extol like what benefit you get from that, how would you go about that?
Well, I always tell people that there's benefits to every size and in body type and shape, and we can find benefits in whatever you are. Like if you're big, if you're small, if you're flexible, if you're not flexible, if you're strong or you're not, like littler people need like less space to get out of bad spots.
Yeah.
And being a bigger female, like I can't just bench press a guy off of me, and I need more space, especially my knees don't bend like they used to, so I need even more space to get things in there. So I think it's more that there's not like, oh, you're a small woman, you're gonna have a hard time. I don't think that's the case. I think everybody should adjust their training based on their training partner.
Sure.
The 20-year-old 230-pound wrestler going with a 60-year-old 130-pound woman, he should be able to adjust.
Sure.
So I think it's more, if you find a place where people are willing to meet you where you are, that's going to be the most beneficial and safe.
Agreed. And that 230-pound wrestler could still get a lot out of that role if they approach it.
Especially if they're like a fast woman running, or faster, smaller person. Like I have a harder time with itty bitties than I do with bigger people, because like hold still.
Yeah.
You agree with that? Yeah.
More challenging in certain ways, like if you're going to get somebody who might be smaller and weaker, but you put them inside mount, and you're like, I'm not going to use any strength, and I'm just going to try to finagle this. Like, there are ways you can challenge yourself.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Well, then what are some of the ways, I would love to know broadly what you've seen as far as changes in jiu-jitsu since you've started training, and then specifically with regards to women's involvement in jiu-jitsu too. Can you speak to those things?
Yeah. I think just seeing so many more female black belts. The first time I saw a female black belt was at Worlds. I think one of the early seminars I did was with Hillary Williams, she was a brown belt at the time, but she was big maybe 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
She got famous for throwing Gabby Garcia and Nogi.
Yeah.
But she was a brown belt and she did a seminar, and I was like, whoa, like a brown belt woman, that's so cool. But seeing a black belt was the first time at Worlds. And now, like yesterday, we were just at a friend's promotion for her to get her black belt. So there's so many more black belts here in the Pacific Northwest, which is just really cool to see. The negative thing that I've seen with it's not just women. I think it's focused more on women's jiu-jitsu, but we talked about this before. I have some friends that are top female competitors right now that aren't getting invited to super fights because they don't have enough followers on Instagram. That's the impact of social media on jiu-jitsu as a whole, I think, is really weird. And I think to be a black belt, to be competitive, and to get seminars, you have to have 100,000 followers.
Rather than your jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, rather than your jiu-jitsu, your competition, your teaching. And also, just because you're a good competitor doesn't mean you're a good instructor. And I've seen that too, where big names in competition scene will come and teach, and you're like, whoa, I can't even do that move. It's so complicated, and they weren't a good instructor, but they're a big name competitor, so they're getting a lot of seminars. But social media, I think, is awful.
I would largely speaking agree. And then there's further downstream from that, there's the worry that it's like an exploitive element where it's like, well, how can I achieve getting as many followers as possible? It's not always by showing great jiu-jitsu. Mm-hmm. It can be a dangerous game to start playing, and then I think that's horrifying. That's terrible that's going on.
Well, I think that the men tend to show more like crazy, fancy, flashy techniques,
sure,
and the women tend to sexualize themselves more just to get more followers. And my friends that are currently having trouble getting like who's number one and things like that, they've flat out been told you don't have enough Instagram followers.
That's crazy.
And it bothers me. And they're not, the two women I'm thinking of, they don't show a lot of skin. They're not showing sexy pictures. And maybe if they did, they would get the super fights. But that shouldn't be what gets you the super fights.
No.
And that bothers me. And then the techniques on Instagram, I think the men will try to show like the craziest, fanciest thing just to get more likes and follows and shares and yeah.
It's one of those almost necessary evils.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well, and it's funny. Like 2 weeks ago, Dominica wanted to do a video. She's trying to keep herself, relevant on social media because she's not competing right now, and people will see her. And she's a 4-time black belt world champion. I'm like, oh, are you still training? And she's like,
wow.
So she was like, let's do a video of masters competitors versus adult competitors, which Bovado had done a couple years ago, and it's pretty funny. And I think ours is pretty similar. And we keep thinking of more ideas, but it's got over 50,000 views right now, and it's kind of weird that these people keep commenting and sharing it, and like. I don't know, it's weird to have that, like that's my most viewed video.
Oh, is that right?
Well,
it's still
kind of funny.
It resonated, but
it's funny to be seeing that right now of like, oh, like I had to check insights, like I didn't even know how to do that. She showed me how to do that. Like, oh, this is interesting.
That's a whole other skill set, and like you said, a sort of necessary evil when it comes to running a jiu-jitsu school. Certainly, I don't think, the people in 1997 were content with anything similar. Just open a jiu-jitsu school and surf and do jiu-jitsu.
Well, and there's some people that have become less relevant because they're not on social media, like past black belt world champions that just don't have a big social media following. People go, oh, are you still training or teaching? And there was somebody famous that I heard of, and I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about that person because they're not on social media, and I can't remember who it is now, but yeah.
Well, fair. That's the social media problem. I wish we could fix. That one's bigger than we can fully effectively tackle in this video. But I agree with you, and I'm glad that you brought that up because that's something people should be aware of, and I think cognizant of, and guarding against to some degree. Hopefully, also looking at jiu-jitsu largely, but for women's jiu-jitsu in specifically. From a self-defense standpoint, because you mentioned Howder and his focus on like old school, like your jiu-jitsu should be relevant to a street self-defense situation, not just the sporting aspect. Do you guys focus on any like self-defense classes? Yeah, most people I talk to do not. But
well, when we first opened up, we did have a self-defense class. It was admittedly not one of our most attended classes. And it was actually run by her brother, who runs our kickboxing program.
Sure.
But he's also he's a bouncer, right? So he comes from that mindset a little bit more.
Yeah.
I'll be honest and say we definitely focus more on sport, right? That's our experience. That's where we feel like we have our strongest things to share. But we'll mention things like, hey, if this was a self-defense situation, you're not going to do this, or this is definitely going to help you out in the self-defense. So we try to bring that up. We also try to have fun, and honestly, we borrowed this idea from a friend of ours. We, like once a quarter or maybe twice a year or something, we do a street clothes night.
Oh, nice.
Right? Where we'll take the gis off and we'll wear whatever it is we're going to wear normally that day. Now, we do tell people it's probably going to get ripped and stretched.
Wear something you're going to donate.
Go to Goodwill the night before, go to the bins and grab something. But that kind of changes the perspective a little bit, but also shows, hey, I can use my jiu-jitsu techniques in this situation still.
Right.
But yeah, we're probably definitely more a sport-oriented academy, which I feel like a lot of places are.
Yeah.
It's just where our passion is too. Like,
Sure, and I think that can be pretty easy. This is my opinion, but it can be pretty easily adapted. And like you said, with a couple of tweaks, or just saying, be aware that maybe this deep half guard pull is so awesome, you wouldn't start a street encounter there. Yeah. Just have some awareness that way. With my own guys, I've tried to experiment. Occasionally in a class, we'll be like, okay, so open palm soft strikes just to show.
And we'll do that within the street clothes night as well, or we'll even throw. We've got some rubber knives that we'll throw out and be like, okay, you've got to be aware. Where is that knife?
And we've brought in people to one of our old teammates is a sheriff in a rural county of Oregon, and he'll come in and he does weapons training, and he's done. We should probably do that again. I need to reach out to him, but we try to bring in, again, people, because we're not, like, people have asked us, do you want to teach a self-defense thing? And I don't know that I feel fully qualified to do that, because knowing jiu-jitsu is different, and like Rhonda does require certain, because it's Gracie Kumaita, they require certain self-defense aspects to get your black belt, and we just don't. But I think always in the back of our head is how to think street, train sport, practice art. And I think we try to kind of do that. And, you know, there was 2 of our students got to do a tag team jiu-jitsu match in a cage, and we got to use the wall, and I got to use my old MMA, like, here's wall work, because jiu-jitsu athletes aren't used to working on the wall or with a cage.
We got the pit now, so.
No, that is changing the game.
But it was cool, and like some of our other students that were just in those classes where we were getting the girls ready for that match were like, oh, this is cool, can we do this more? Yes, but it's not practical for the jiu-jitsu that we do to be pushing up against the wall working your takedowns.
Right.
But it was, or like using the wall to get up. So we have done that, and hopefully we get to, that was something Fabiano put together, and the girls had a lot of fun, and we had a lot of students come and watch, and like it was, doing the tag team is a whole strategy in itself, and doing stuff like that was really fun. I think it would work very well in that pit.
Yeah.
Note.
For sure, for future reference.
Jamie,
Well, and you fought several MMA matches. Tell me a little bit about that and how valuable that was to your perspective on jiu-jitsu.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would stand, punch in from my clinch, push against the cage, try to take him down. My first fight, the girl was 4 inches taller than me. She was like 6'3" or 6'4". She was big. She was significantly heavier than me. I couldn't get her down. So I just kneed her a bunch from the cage. And then I've only had 3 fights because we couldn't find the opponents. Being a bigger woman, I think if I was 5'2", we could have found me a lot of opponents. But being 5'10" and, you know, at the time over 200 pounds, I couldn't find fights. So it was really hard. And this may sound cocky, but I feel like the girls that I fought didn't belong in the cage with me. Like they were white belts and I was a purple belt. And like my second fight, I think I had just gone against Chris Cyborg at Worlds, and then I'm fighting a white belt. And it's just the you know, this was at the time where she had just been popped for steroids in the strike force, and she was like the woman in MMA, and then I'm fighting a white belt, and it was like, it just feels
a disconnect.
Like, yeah, and then my last fight, I had mount, and the girl swam her arm under my leg to try. She didn't know what she was doing, and I was just took her other hand, and I like looked at Dave Hagen, the ref, and was like, "Are you gonna stop this?" You know, it was hard for me finding fights, and I think even today there's very few women over 155 fighting, which is insane. There's a woman in the Bay Area right now who I think she normally fought jiu-jitsu at heavyweight, and she's fighting at 145. And and she's I think 6 feet tall.
Wow. Okay, so this is one of the questions that used to be kind of, I think, more controversial, but gi versus no gi, where do you guys lie in that divide, and is it even really a divide? Do you have no gi classes specifically at the school? Do you think
one, kind of two, sometimes?
Well, we have one, which I think could answer your question.
Is that
right there?
And it's one of our smallest classes, even though we don't teach it. One of our other coaches teaches it, and she's phenomenal. She's got a Sambo and MMA background and is a 3rd-degree black belt. Like, she's awesome and mean and small and like, but we just like pajamas.
We like to, it kind of goes back to like the self-defense thing, right? Like I don't know why, but I enjoy wearing this funny little heavy outfit and, you know, using it against people. And I really enjoy training no-gi. Sure. I think it's fun, it's active, it's fast.
I don't know what to do with my hands.
What do I do with my hands? I think the divide is part of the hype, right? It's jiu-jitsu, you know, at the end of the day. But it just goes back to we like to be, right? And that's where we're gonna go. I don't think one's better than the other. You know, we've got one of our black belts right now who was very reliant on his grips.
He used to be a strongman competitor and like power lifter. And
He's one of those where if he grabs your gi, you don't even think about getting it off, right? So your first fight is not allowed. But he's been wearing gloves.
Oh, really?
In class lately to
break his
try to take himself away.
That's interesting.
He hates no-gi. He would not go. He will
no-gi.
not go to a no-gi class, right? But he recognizes that he's getting too dependent on his grips.
Sure.
So I think it's valuable in that way that we don't get too used to our tools, because what if those tools aren't there sometimes? And actually, he's enjoying it because he's like, I've got to be more active now. Like
more.
I've got to move more. This is more of a workout now because I can't just hold you down, right, and keep you in that position and not allow you to do things. So I think that's helping him, right? I think there's definite, positives to doing both. I think the confrontation between it all, or it's just hype. Like, it's jiu-jitsu, people. Let's just do it. Let's just have fun. If you enjoy wearing spandex and a rash guard, that's fine. Go ahead and do it, and let's just all have fun.
Well, I think if you look at ADCC from this past year, most of the people on the podium are also very good at gi.
Yeah.
And the no-gi versus like the people that only do no-gi, I think are limiting themselves. I think there's so many, I think Theon talks about this, like there's so many more techniques in the gi. Like my favorite thing is a bow and arrow. You can't do that in no-gi. I've tried to figure out a way. I haven't. Or like a spider guard. You can't really do spider guard. And like there's just so many more techniques in the gi. I think it's just weird, more fun. And I don't like the legs, so maybe that's also part of it. There's such like the leg attacks are so sexy right now.
That is the current meta. I know. I have the same trepidation about that. I know that I should probably get with the times or whatever and embrace the no-gi leg lock aggressive game. It is cool. It can be fun to watch, and there's a lot of technical aspects to it. But yeah, no, I share what you're saying. I like the gi. I like putting it on. I like wearing it. I like rolling in it. Like, I would agree with all of that.
And I keep saying like when we have time, when do we have time? But like to go. The 10th Planet Gym here in Portland is really good, and Phil Schwartz is really good, and he's always like, yeah, come by and train, and you're always welcome. And I'm like, you're always welcome, put your pajamas on too, Phil. So I would love to spend some time with him, just playing with like what he knows, and then, but we just don't have time.
Sure, no, I wish there was 38 hours in a day. You would live to be 10,000 years old or something. Maybe I'd be able to fit it in then. Well, okay, and then this is a question that I think is interesting to ask jiu-jitsu people, particularly competitors. So there's jiu-jitsu is like the art that we all practice. We come here and we train, and we have our community of people, and we can even go and compete. But then there's this separate, attempt. I think you look at CJI, or you mentioned ADCC or flow grappling, to have it be like more for mass consumption, like as a sporting event, something. It's nowhere near this, but something like NFL or the NBA or something that would have people would just be able to sit down and watch a jiu-jitsu match, even if they didn't train. There's plenty of people who watch football that have never played football and enjoy it, and our fans.
Yes, we were up late last night watching.
There you go. Do you guys enjoy, not just from a competitor standpoint, because I think there's value if you're a competitor to watching events where you could kind of scout people or see what's going on, but just as a fan of the sport, do you sit and watch a jiu-jitsu? Before the question ends,
We watch the CJI. I keep wanting to call it CGI.
Yeah.
We watch the Craig Jones thing more than we watch ADCC. We did go up to Foster's that Sunday of ADCC, and we tried to watch in the car on the iPad. Brian's driving, and we brought 2 of our black belts up with us. But I find the Craig Jones better. I think if they want to make it more viewer-friendly sport, it needs to be shorter matches. I think a 10-minute, 20-minute match is like you're gonna lose. You lose me.
Well, no, if for whatever reason nobody wants to go in and just finish it. Right. They're like, I've got 20 minutes. Let's
play for a while.
Let's touch each other for a little while. Let's figure this out. Okay, and then it's like the last 2 minutes. It's like, oh shit, it's go time. It's like, but why? Like, why can't we just? I mean, that's the fun thing about Masters. Like, I think I'd much rather watch a Masters match because they're like, let's get to it. Like, we've only got 5 minutes. We gotta work.
Sure.
If I'm down 4 points in the first minute. Like, this is a lot to come back from. But yeah, as spectators, it's not a spectator-friendly sport. I mean, no matter how much or what, I mean, everybody's trying to change the rules and change the venue. It's just not a spectator sport. The way the game is played right now, everybody wants to play the rules. It's not fast paced. You know, wrestling has what 3 minute periods, and you do, but it's fast paced, right? For whatever reason, jiu-jitsu is being slowed down. And that just makes it really boring to watch, right? When we go to these larger tournaments, especially ones that are 4 or 5 days long, you know, the first day you're all excited. By day 3, you're like, oh my god, like I don't know what I'm looking at anymore. Like I'm just kind of zoned out and spaced out.
Sure.
I mean, for me, I try to watch specific athletes.
Yeah.
You know, if there's somebody like Adam, like if we go to something and Adam's like, I want to see him doing all these things that are, I mean, essentially fundamental jiu-jitsu, and people are like, oh, there's no way he could actually do, you know, all the, back to the social media, there's no way he wouldn't do that to me. You go and slap bump with him and see what happens, but yeah, even as athletes, it is darn boring to watch.
I went to Worlds this year with our purple belt student, and then Marisha, she made it to the semifinals of the open division. So then on Sunday she didn't make it to the finals of her division, but we were with her and watching, and she had to be there for the podium. And the way they did the podium this year was kind of like they did the open podium last. So we were there all day watching the finals matches, and I was like,
oh dude.
And it always seems like the more that's on the line, the slower it gets, right? It's like, oh, it's the finals match. Like, it's not like I'm going to give it. It's like, no, let's slow it down.
Let's wait for the last 30 seconds.
Let's wait for the last 30. Get that advantage.
Yeah.
But I mean, I can't fault those people either.
Yeah.
Right?
They're playing the game.
They're playing the game. They know the rules, right? And they know how to play that game, which is something we're trying to teach people. You know, we've got a lot of our competitors are submission-only people, and it's like they're starting to get into the points game, and it's like, you gotta play the game. Like, don't fall back to your butt. Like,
one of our students at the Rev, a white belt, was her first time competing, her first match. She got to half guard top, and I was like, okay, there was like 10 seconds left. I was like, we say be smart, which means stall.
Don't weigh ourselves.
Just cut that out.
She got to half guard top, and I was like, okay, just hold here, you're good. And then she got up and she got her hand raised, and she was like, what? And I was like, you got an advantage for that half guard. And she was like, what? I got to what? And I was like, okay, you're a white belt, it's your first tournament. Right. But I also tried to help the referee just to make sure. I was like, you got your advantage for that half guard, right? Yeah.
The coaches play a game too.
But I think another Chris Howder thing that he always talks about is like the Masters division should be the longer matches because we're old and we move slow.
Right.
The adults are who should be sprinting.
Sure.
And I've always agreed with that. Like the adult matches, if they were maybe even 3 minutes, imagine the pace and I don't know. I mean, maybe somebody should try it and see, but.
If you're listening out there, Craig Jones put it together.
3-minute matches, or maybe 3-minute rounds, and you win the round like MMA. I think that's a kind of cool thing too. I don't like the EBI overtime rules. I think they're terrible. You disregard the whole first part of the match, and then you get rewarded for escaping the back and allowing them to get mount on you.
Right. Yeah. No, it's crazy.
Eddie, that's terrible. Terrible jiu-jitsu.
So I hope you're listening. So in the pit, 3-minute matches, no EBI overtime.
No EBI overtime, just 3 rounds, 10-point must, like MMA. I'll be a judge, but I'm not putting it together.
Fair. Well, hopefully some
Maybe
million.
Jeff can.
Yeah. There we go. Awesome. Well, though, this has been a lot of fun, guys. Thank you to both of you. I really appreciate it. Really looking forward to what you have to show us. And thank you. All right, Unicorn Jiu Jitsu. Come check them out in Portland, Oregon. Thanks, guys.
Yep.